Hi Sanket, good afternoon. How are you doing?
Hey Amit, good afternoon. Thanks for having me. I'm doing well, yeah. Monday afternoon, getting through the grind.
Yeah, makes sense. I think everybody is grinding through,
Yeah,
especially at a time where nobody knows what's happening, especially in the data and AI industry. Um,
uh,
Everybody is into Gen AI. Everybody sounds desperate in trying to see that what is this tech? How do we apply tech? And more than that, I think businesses looking for ROI, which what we are hearing is that
yeah.
the scene is gloomy, is what appears. But I think first of all, thanks for joining my podcast, which I do with a lot of data and AI leaders in the industry,
Mhm.
especially the ones who have been on the both sides of the fence. When where I draw the fence when Gen AI happened somewhere in 2022. So it's been 3 years since Gen AI got introduced with ChatGPT coming in, and then I think there's been AI war going on.
Right,
Um,
right.
Repeatedly we are getting so many tools, whether it is for image generation, whether it is for text generation, code generation, and whatnot. But some from being somebody, I've been to that generation where I had done most of the things by hand.
Yeah,
We refer to Stack Overflow for solutions. We used to stitch around solutions and then kind of try things, figure things out,
yeah.
and then apply it. And a lot of things we did, and now suddenly we see that whatever we did, most of it is taken care of by AI. So
Yeah.
I wanted to have your perspective on what's happening, what's in it for data and AI teams, what roles are still relevant, what skills do you see if you have to form a data and AI team today compared
Mm-hmm.
to when you had teams before, right? How would you
Right, right.
those teams? What are the how would you say define their KPIs? How do you fit in AI? I have tons of questions, but
Sure, sure.
instead of intimidating with you with those, I think let's take it lightly. And I would like to first know from you about your background. How did you start your career? How did you walk all the paths and up to the 17 years, 17, 18 years? You did a lot of things. You worked in a startup, you ran a business, and then you have led teams. So
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to know more about and get insights about in your career history.
Sure, sure. Amit, thanks again for having me here. It's a pleasure. I know while you were talking through all the things that are happening at the AI, the one thing that I just want to talk about is uh, a lot of use cases are being solved, but I think the challenge that organizations are seeing is the scale or scaling up of how these use cases can be delivered at an enterprise level, right? Because eventually these are the paying customers that would eventually have achievements. But that's just a thought. My career has been a pretty, I would say, an interesting journey, yaar. And I always promote and keep telling people that I work with that careers are unique games, and some of it is comparable. Most of it is what happens to you based on where you are, what you do, and how you perform at that particular period in time, right? So most recently, I was with a company called FactSpan Analytics. I was in the capacity of a senior director, handling a couple of clients, multiple teams across BID and data science. Prior to that, I was building or scaling an organization called Akira Insights, um, a small boutique setup of data and consulting services. We were more focused on the India market. And fortunately, we were able to sell off that company. NetScribes was the company that acquired it late last year. Prior to that was a long stint with EXL Analytics, about 7.5 years, three and a half years here in India, and then couple of years in the US working very closely with the clients. Um, but I think what drove me, I would say, was initially I got a very early exposure to BI, I would say, right? So, like all of us, we graduated, just wanted to get a job. We have no clue what the world has for us, but we had a lot of zeal and energy. So I landed up in Chennai with Tata Consultancy Services, did a little bit of data warehousing in the initial bit, and then within 4 or 5 months, I was lucky enough to get into a project where they were implementing Cognos dashboards. And Cognos was one of these early tools which was doing like tabular reports, and just you had
Yeah.
indicators um, about what's going green, what's going red, and if you can call that out, right? And that just got me thinking in terms of, okay, I've been developing these reports for, say, an insurance client, and they want to understand which geography, which sub-geography, which pin codes are our insurance premiums dropping or things like that. But who is the end consumer? What do these people do with these kind of reports, right? Because the reports are huge. They're not like we almost sat for like almost a day to create that one piece of report, not like now when you click a button and drag and drop things and the jazzy line chart appears, right? So that got me interested. But again, life has a lot of things and a lot of expectations that you want to do. What eventually happens is I was smitten by, again, more of general management and how people take decisions. And that's when I took a call to go ahead and do an MBA. While doing the MBA, I was extremely enticed by marketing as a function, right? So if I say marketing, I went ahead after my MBA and joined ZTV to do sales and marketing for their international channels, right? But again, a lot of time, a lot of energy, very quickly realized that I don't want to build a career here, right? Because it was a lot of sell, it was a lot of other things to do. But I was again, that's what I say. I was again fortunate enough to have got into Mu Sigma way back in late 2010, 2011, when Mu Sigma was a company which was into pure play analytics. They were solving problems through data, which the big fours were solving differently. And at that point of time, nobody knew about analytics, right? So when I went in, it was like literally going through university and understanding how do you combine science, art, and maths to solve problems, right? You're looking about distributions, you're looking about Gaussian algorithms, learning these things very, very closely to apply on business problems that you can solve, right? And that's why I say, so 2 years at Mu Sigma was like university for us to solve and set ourselves up to what the next decade unfolded for us, right? So yeah, that's a brief here. I think multiple roles started working as similarly as engineers, analysts, then
Yeah.
started working closely with uh, either on-site, onshore, offshore coordination, started handling teams, started handling multiple teams, then started working very closely with business, directly trying to shape the problem statements in terms of, okay, if this is a pain point with the client, what can we do to make sure we can move the needle, right? And the move the needle was not about just about, hey, can I bring an application, can I improve their systems, but basically what is the end decision that we are helping with. So yeah, let me take a pause. I know it's a blur, but multiple interesting experiences and things that have happened over the last couple of years. Yeah.
Awesome. So, I just wanted to dig in a bit on the kind of problems which you got an opportunity to work upon. If you could reflect on your experience and call out maybe a couple of problems which you really had a great kick solving them, and maybe few experiences which really didn't go that well. Maybe both have their learnings, right, from the good as well as the not so good. So if you could reflect upon a bit of the kind of statements in say insurance domain, I see a lot of your experience falls into the insurance domain. But yeah, would
Yeah.
love to know from you like what were some of those interesting problems?
Sure, sure. And exactly as you said, the ones that did not go well stick for a longer period, frankly, Amit, right? They make you stronger, they make you understand. And again, I am one of those person who likes to reflect upon. So when I reflect upon, I feel that okay, these are different levers that you could have changed or things would have changed differently and stuff like that. But yeah, I would take a couple of them. Yeah, one of the most interesting pieces that I think we were solving. It was more of a short term, 3 4 months project. We were working for a mid-size uh, Midwest insurance company. They were trying to figure out a solution in terms of how do we identify our sales agents or insurance agents who come in through the door early to identify who are going to be my top performers over a period of time, right? And this was very interesting, and this is very similar to what Incurious is doing. They were trying to create these mappings between, they had a big set of about 80, 90 questions that they would ask people while they were interested to apply for the insurance agent. An insurance agent in US is a regulated bit, so you need to have a certain certification to start applying. So once you're cleared with that, how are they responding to use cases? How are they responding to situations? And then try and manipulate. I wouldn't say manipulate, try and understand the data points and extrapolate to figure out, okay, I had somebody who had walked in through the door, had a certain persona, had these kind of qualities, and had responded similarly to certain set of questions. And that guy, after 5 years, is now my champion agent, right? He's able to drive business. He's able to bring us more revenue. And this gave me an exposure of how organizations need to move the needle a little by little, right? A lot of times what happens is when I interact with the data engineers, data scientists, and business analysts, they are not exposed to the business exposure or the larger picture, as we call it, right?
Very true.
So if you sit with somebody who's heading the overall sales function in an insurance business, he's not worried about what's going to happen next quarter, right? He's worried about, hey, I need to grow this business at a certain scale, and to grow that business, what are the input parameters that I can get in, right? And how right can I be on those input parameters, because they understand the process. It's not that tomorrow a certain windfall is going to happen and suddenly you are going to do 50% more business than you were doing the quarter before, right? But
Right.
if there is a process and they are understanding how sales agents work, which is very similar to, I think, what was applicable even when I was in music, something very similar that healthcare used to do, right? They would
Mm.
also have sales agents, and they would want to understand what all can we do using the Salesforce data that we are seeing, the commentary that they're putting in, and all of that. So I know this is at a high level, but what was most interesting was working closely with some of these really senior folks, right? And then trying to bring down things which are first principle, and also trying to bring in that, okay, I am a consultant, I know expertly what data and analytics can do for you, right? But the core of your business is your business. You will have to tell me how those workflows go, and then we start building it in a very collaborative way, right? So yeah, this is one of the very interesting pieces that we solved very early, and this was way back, I would say, in 2014 or sometime, right? But I still remember this as a very interesting use case.
So, Sanket, I heard you talking about first principles thinking, right? And
Mhm.
I know it's a very strong pedigree coming from the Mu Sigma background. So I have also been through that pedigree where when I joined, and honestly, I joined Mu Sigma right after my MBA, and
Mhm.
the only thing at that point, it was around 2012, and I had few of my friends who had started their careers with Mu Sigma, and they used to be known a lot for people going there, working for a couple of years, preparing for CAT, then moving out, get to IMs. And because it used to sort of give that exposure to problem solving, the business
Yeah,
problem
yeah,
solving.
yeah.
So when you talked about the math, science, and art, right? So the math part of it is also is something which I also got exposed to. I at Mu Sigma I worked for retail customer, and I got exposed to the foundations of supply chain management. I mean, I had done right before Mu Sigma at my college at Great Lakes. I'd done a supply chain management
Mhm.
course, but again, when you are joining firm and when you are hitting a problem statement, the problem statement could be one of the subdomains of the wider
Yeah.
uh, industry. And the biggest challenge was that, okay, how do I pretend to know things about the, okay,
Yeah.
I have been told that, okay, hey, here is a multi-billion dollar firm, a Fortune 500, who's into, say, retail domain. The only way I
Mhm.
relate to retail is how I go and do purchases, say
Yeah.
at a
Yeah.
retail store or something, right? But at the same time, the way purchases or retail works or behaves in India is very different from the way it happens in the US.
Yeah.
So I would
Yeah.
like to understand from you that when you talk about first principle thinking, what are some of the, say, ground rules of first principle thinking, and how did you apply that to sort of learn these domain specific things? Because you have to sound like professional in front of the customer.
A very, very interesting question, Amit, and I think you are hitting the nail on the head where you're talking about our careers or careers of people who are in that who are in that range of 5 to 10 years, right?
Yeah.
Where you're not as a young professional where everything needs to be handheld, and you get thrown around in different kind of problem statements that you can solve either by getting inspired by things that you've solved in the past, or draw parallels and understand how quickly you can sound confident as well as be able to execute in a crunch period of time without having the years of experience that other people might have, right? I think what worked for me, I would say, uh, two parts work for me, right? One part is being able to draw a lot from uh, being very close and open and candid with whoever my end stakeholders were, right? Um, when I was able to walk through into some of these meetings at EXL, there's always be a senior who would read the room, who will understand, and who will draw the conversation into a certain way, right? Because that's how consulting and selling happens, for an example. But you have to understand where are the cues where you have to come in and pitch in with whatever you are an expert on, right? So, hypothetical example that I would take is if we were consulting a retail service provider and we were solving a data monetization problem, there was a very senior VP, and we were presenting to the CEO of that company. They wanted to take the internal data, massage it, and sell it as market indicators or something, right? So the major part of the conversation was just these two guys getting in and understanding and all of that. But there was a cue at the conversation that, okay, you guys are saying that we can monetize it and we can sell it to our customers, but how will our customers see it, right? And that was the cue where I knew that, okay, I had worked in a couple of places where I understand dashboards better and I understand how there are different layers of users. So you take that cue and you jump in and say, okay, we will create a product or a platform which would have access to your visualizations, right? And we will tier those visualizations based on different people. So your execs who are basically funding your monetization projects will just see at a weekly level, right? And then there are data analysts who are trying to slice and dice the data and trying to figure out more insights out of it. They would see a different view. And then there'll be another view which will be more custom. You give us requirements and we will build on that.
Yeah.
The reason it came across, because I feel that that was the right cue for me to jump in and validate and make him or her understand, which might not be his purview for a CEO, right? He doesn't want to understand how it operates. But if he understands that there's a junior guy who's able to articulate it well, that this is the end product or this is the end feature that your team will be able to see, that builds in a lot of confidence into how what you were stepping on, right? The second part that you were talking about, first principle thing, is also being able to be very thorough in the initial work that you do, right? So one is you use the situation, complexity, and end goal that you want to achieve and write it out, thrash it out on a whiteboard in terms of being very clear that, okay, whether it's a 5 week project or a 5 month project, you know that you are able to guide your team with what are we solving for actually, right? Because the data pipeline breaking or the IT hardware not working or the cloud not working nowadays are just part of the bumps that in that journey, right? But if you're able to create, okay, we are here at this point in time and this is the end goal that we want to achieve, the team is basically a little shielded from all the noise that happens while you're
Yeah.
executing, right?
Yeah.
Then comes the first principle where we start saying that, okay, to solve the whatever unimaginable piece or the imaginable piece that we've sold, what all is required to get on with that, right? So in our cases, it was basically, hey, we are solving this, but we don't know where the data is, right? We don't know which application it's sitting in. We don't know who the owner of that data is, who's going to give us access, when are we going to get access? Because everybody wants to build models. They want to build models from the first day, right? But nobody wants to understand that to get to that place, you need at least a governance structure. You need some levels of back and forth before that happens, right? So calling those out just explains things and sets the tone in terms of what all are the steps. These might be beated out and said, no, we want to work agile, we want to do a high project management and things like that. But I would feel that these are first principle and these are logical blocks that you need to just lay it out and spread it out for people to understand. And then again, go back and start solving real problems, right? So if you see, or when you're doing an EDA and you have certain call outs to make, just make those callouts as soon as possible, right? Don't sit on
Yeah.
it and say that after we build the model, we'll inform the
Yeah.
client that, okay, boss, in one region for the last 10 days, you've not received any data, your sensors are not working, and there's a red flag, and this will impact the model. But we will tell them after the model is built is not the right approach, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, that's what has worked for me. Yeah. I might be sounding different, but I think I've not taken things on a like I would not go into and start and put a observe structure into fit into this model and then solve it. It's mostly been logical. It's mostly been what would work for different people.
Got it. Got it. So interestingly, now I'll move a little bit further and to
Sure.
the role you played at Akira as the head of delivery. So this role is where you move beyond your personal capacity, your personal capability, and now you have a team where there will
Mm-hmm.
be members who will be doing bunch of things. There'll be members who might be good at consulting, who might be doing more on the discovery, problem discovery, getting to the what would be the milestones, what are the success metrics to get this done. And then as you mentioned, there's a team which is called the sort of a core data team who does the
Mm-hmm.
engineering, who does the say analytics, who does the Power BIs of the world, the SQLs of the world, and Pythons of the world. So
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to understand that before Gen AI, right?
Mm-hmm.
How did you basically, so for example, you experienced something, you applied first principles thinking, and you always get a thing, right? Hey, I understand this problem. I'd rather do it myself, right? Versus now you reach a point where you need a team. You can't do everything by yourself. One, it is of course not humanly possible, and at the same time, you need to have a team which is kind of focused, which works the same way, understands things the same way, and builds a solution which is basically yes, which is acceptable to the customer. So before Gen AI, the way a head of delivery would work, and say post Gen AI, how would you
Mm-hmm.
say form your team differently? What would be your expectations? What are the roles you want to keep? What are the roles you want to do away with? How would you restructure your team pre versus post Gen AI?
Oh, that's a deep one, man. I don't know whether I have the right answer to that, but I'll go with the flow. In terms of the pre Gen AI era, I think what you hit on was heading delivery for a new nascent organization, not having played that role before was something of a opportunity that I grabbed with both hands. And I think, as I was saying, the larger principle for me that I was looking for, not at a weekly or a monthly basis, was basically building capability in people, right? Because I had evolved, I would say, at a little faster track at EXL in terms of how I was able to move through the ranks and I was able to perform and deliver. And that happened not because of only me, it also happened because the ecosystem supporting how you function, what you are good at, and then they playing on your strengths and then giving you those level of opportunities, right? So pre Gen AI era, the idea was or the overarching theme was I have to build capability in people, right? So
Right.
that's when it comes down of you identifying, okay, what are people's strengths and what are people's weaknesses, right? One of
Mm.
the beautiful thing that I still remember and it just came back in my mind was we used to go and hire a lot from colleges like PSG Tech and College of Engineering at Madras and places like that, right? And we used to hire sometimes MTechs and MCS. Uh, Although I was not good at Tamil, but I understand that I could see within a week that some of the new guys who had come in were not able to understand the pace at which I was talking and the pace at which I was articulating things, right? And I really went back to them and told them that, guys, if you don't understand it, um, spend a week just thinking about the problem statement in your native language, right?
Mm.
Write it down in your native language, then come back to me, translate it in English, and then tell me where are you getting stuck, right? Very, I would say, very juvenile kind of an approach, but it helps build trust in teams, right?
Mm.
What that helped me do was I was able to help with my second in lines who were the practice heads for BI, DE, and data science to start interacting. And this I'm talking about while we were virtual, right? Half of the team was virtual.
Yeah.
And I started telling them that, guys, you should spend like at least a half an hour or an hour with your 3 or 4 people whom you're finding difficulty, they're not able to understand what is happening and how it is happening, to just spend those 1 hour just like breaking the ice and just understanding what they're good at and what they're not, right? Because given instructions, they were able to deliver. But when you were not given instructions, they were just going haywire, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that helped a lot, and I think that also percolated in that place where you build that everybody take at least two people under your wings and help them succeed, right?
Hmm.
Um, Coming down to post Gen AI, what's happening is there are, I feel there are two types of personas, right? And this is my personal view. One of the persona is the guy who wants to get the job done as quickly as possible, whoever is the manager, project lead, whatever designation that you want to call him or her, right? He isn't bothered whether Amit or Sanket have looked through Gen AI and are taking its help and pasting the code or editing the code till the time it's error free. I don't care, right?
Yeah.
The other guy is the guy who's a little averse to this because they have slogged through and they've learned a lot of things by discomfort, right? And that discomfort is basically, hey, while researching through Stack Overflow, I found a problem statement, I found a code snippet, I went and pasted it, but it didn't work. And I had to spend the next 4 hours understanding what errors happen. So I know how systems operate, I know how your long programming languages operate, where is object oriented programming and things like that. They are more averse if they say these younger people come back is within 5 to 10 minutes or within the next 4 hours and say, hey, I've completed my work, because they know that in the colloquial term, जब ये फटेगा तो किसी को नहीं पता होगा ये कहाँ फटा है.
True.
Right?
True.
So
Yeah.
if I am the persona A who's not worried about how systems are going to operate, I think that place Gen AI is helping a lot. It's also making people smarter because they are able to, only if they're able to articulate the prompt well, and only if they're able to articulate what is happening well, they will get a good solution, and they will also get to use the either a Gemini or a Claude or anything else more as a reasoning board, right? But the other guy who's got a set of people who are just copy pasting and not understanding things, for him or her, the accountability still remains with that person, right?
Right.
And that is becoming a challenge, according to me. The pace definitely has come down here. What we
Right.
were doing in like 6 7 weeks is now expected to be done in 2 weeks, and everybody is asking for it because that's the only measure right now that has been sold on ROI, which is still quantifiable in a services industry, right? We saved X number of hours.
Right.
So yeah.
So given your background, like I have also walked a similar path of doing projects which was very BI focused, analytics focused, reporting focused. So we definitely had to, I mean, I also had to spend a lot of time to understand what matters to the business, what KPIs matters to them, trying to understand, say, their daily workflows, their pain points, then getting into data discovery, basically getting to understand building data dictionaries, then kind of getting some, say, access to the data, maybe get some sample data, get started with EDAs, right? Build something, get quickly build some prototypes for the customer, right? And then go back and build the full solution, then roll out adoption. So calling out the entire life cycle of a project, if the same project which you did, say, in your stint as at EXL or New Sigma, now if you have to leverage Gen AI and do it again, right? As a head of delivery or as somebody who is say sort of providing us consulting services today, how would you restructure your project? How would you restructure your team? What expectations would you have from your team? How would you say put them into somebody who is, say, vibe coding versus somebody who is really building it well? So that we are able to show productivity gain, which every customer expects, that okay, everything will be much faster,
Mm-hmm.
delivered much faster, but
Mm-hmm.
and second, at the same time, the value or the quality won't be compromised. So how would be your typical team
Correct.
structure, your flow, or if the same project you had to implement, what are some of those, I would say, the unsexy thing which you would like to put it to AI and get
Got
it?
it.
Other things
Got
which
it.
you would own by yourself. Okay, this let me still do it by myself. Earlier, I had to give it out to somebody because I simply didn't have time. But now I have my own assistant, AI assistant, whom I can, because
Mhm.
I have the best context. In the end, for AI, the one who is more
Yeah.
deeply connected with the problem, understands the domain better, can give context better. And many times I also feel, let me own this part. It's okay because it is AI. I can
Mhm.
10x faster rather than giving to my
Mhm.
team, teaching them, training them, and still I may fear that the outcome may not be of that quality.
Yeah. So before I answer that, I also want to just touch upon something that I've been reflecting on because um, I've got time now. Is there is a little bit of mistrust also, right? When you talk about this, right? There is a mistrust because I don't know how much research somebody has done and given me a piece of code that is working today, right? And definitely, the other part that we should definitely have a separate podcast altogether is about the confirmation bias that all your chat GPTs and others put you into. But to your first question, right? So I think if I compare pre and post, I think some of the um, roles and designations or responsibilities have mixed up a lot, right? So in the past, if I was doing a data science project, there'd be a guy who would basically do a requirement gathering. There'll be another guy who's doing a data um, um, EDA and just data
Yeah,
exploration. There's a separate guy who's doing the actual model build, and there's another fourth guy who's actually going to deploy it, understanding the ecosystem that or the tech stack that the particular client or organization has, right? I think now what I have observed is now the way that is changing is the requirement gathering guy is not the requirement gathering guy. He's become more of the product owner,
mm,
right? So he becomes the person who's going to divide time in terms of who's going to spend how much time on each of these problem statements, right? And it's not sequential, everything is running in parallel. Um, what that allows you to do is you can have different people with different skill set and come in and fill in the gaps that he's identified. But the first role becomes extremely critical now because it's not just understanding the client's ecosystem or client's workflow, it's understanding that, mimicking it in what is happening in the industry or what your product would or your platform or your solution would look like, building the larger blocks as we would call it, that okay, if there is a data ingestion engine, is it running on airflow, is it running on a incremental load, whatever is happening, which was earlier decided by the data engineer, right?
right,
He would get it and then he would look at the requirements, he would look at what my quantity of data, what is the velocity of data, veracity of data, and then he will propose that okay, this is the kind of architecture that we should get in, right? But right now the product owner is expected to know these things, right? Ki,
yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
guys, if I have to go in, no, if I have to go in, I need to go ahead and propose what the engineer is going to build for me, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it's not something, there can be internal discussions, but the expectation is not that you cannot come to me and ask me what should be the best solution around, because that's it might be true if you're building an EDAP platform for a big organization, then a data architect comes in, right? But
yeah,
now the data engineers are getting more ring fenced that okay, I need to know what I have to build, the user stories, the epochs, whatever you want to write it in the agile format are going to be very, very specific. But the amount of work that would happen is much more shrinked and much more qualitatively higher, right? Because this is the
right.
scope, this is what you need to write, this is what you need to give me back, and then I need to tie it back also again, that a product owner needs to say that okay, when this deployment happens in your dev environment, who's checking it? When it's happened in the prod environment, who's checking it? He or she might not be checking it, or because the Gen AI is available and things like that, they can write use cases much easier, right? So there is
Yeah,
not a separate QA guy who's writing, okay, what are those 20 use cases that we need to solve for and check? He's the guy who's giving everything in, right?
right.
So the forward deployable engineer or whatever they're calling it, that role is becoming exciting because of this analogy is what I feel like, because it's becoming very critical. The expectation from your end customers and your clients are also that hey, I want that kind of a guy who can do everything, knows technology very, very well. And if I take that tech piece to my internal tech team, they will review it in a day and give it back to you, not like take two
Right.
weeks to do this.
All right, Sanket, I just wanted to hold on to the point you mentioned about this evolving role of a forward deployed engineer. right? Again, sounds very uh, different. And there's a forward, which means that we are trying to push the engineer more closer to the problem. And we're trying to
Yeah.
put this person who basically understands the tech, because they see there always have been this sort of a disconnect between, oh, he's the business guy, he's the tech guy, I'm the business guy, I'm not very much caring about tech, I'm the tech guy, I don't have a clue about where my solution is getting deployed or being used or whether it is useful or not. I faced it many times, and when I did my MBA and I got into a sort of a techno functional role, that gave me an understanding that okay, how anything and everything you do in tech, if it is not solving a problem, it's just a fancy expense, right, to show in your P&L. So I wanted to hold upon that thought, and I want to understand that okay, how do you then, uh, considering this role that where everybody has to take up a lot beyond what you were doing, because earlier you could hide behind and say that okay, I have a lot of coding to do. I have to build this dashboard. You have to do click, 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 and do tons of things. You have to build KPIs, write so much of code. But now a lot of things, those things sort of getting outsourced to AI, it opens up a lot of room for people to kind of, and then the question is, in your role, what is that you should pick up? If you have been a sort of a PM, what else you should pick up? If you have been a techie, what else you should pick up? If you have been the guy who promotes adoption, what else you could pick up? So what are your thoughts around this new, these new roles opening up and the idea of people going from X to 10X?
Got it. Got it. So two things. One definitely. Let's quote somebody like Elon, who says that clearly somebody who's leading an organization needs to be an engineer, right? Because if you don't understand or don't care about the problem deeply, it's not going to be extremely effective, right? Uh, and let me take a hard stance on this and say that the roles that evolved during where we worked in as professionals and started careers evolved late 90s, early 2000s,
Yeah,
right? Where people's capability in terms of handling things as well as the applications or solutions of handling things were very much siloed, right?
yeah,
And that's why it required a more business focused guy who's expert in this, wants to do this, has spent time and energy to understand the dynamics and then writes the requirements and brings it. So that was the older way of doing
yeah,
things. Now, as you rightly said, the PM definitely is not a role where you need to be able to write the code, but you cannot be averse to say that, hey, I don't understand what a container is,
yeah,
right? Or the PM cannot be somebody who does not understand how an API call happens, right? Or a PM is not somebody in the future state, or maybe if he or she is a good PM, he should be able to understand where are these things going to break, or what should be my check to understand whether the systems are talking to each other, right? While the other flip side is, I think that it's a little bit easier for the engineers because they've been playing around with this. They can understand that okay, if I build something that's going to increase the storage cost or the compute cost because I am like putting everything in the engine and asking it to recalculate every time a API is being called, that cost versus whatever you want to quantify, the GPU or the usage, is something that the engineers initially at our times were not thinking about, right? They were just thinking about,
yeah,
hey, I have a piece of code, I've been given things, and I just need to execute, right?
yeah,
If they start understanding the business implications, as you rightly said, that if the tech is not solving a business problem, it's just a P&L or it's just a loss for the tech debt that they are creating, right?
right,
I think that has to be very clearly articulated on either built through organizations, or you need to take that extra interest to understand why my query uh, cannot run for a minute now, right?
right,
How much does it impact the overall project? Because it's not just me, there are about 400 other engineers, and everybody starts writing bad codes, it just inflates like out of proportions, right?
true.
um, so yeah, that's an example that I can think of right now, but I don't know if it answered your question, but that's what came to my mind.
No, definitely, because see, I'm hearing a lot about this term called high agency people in today, where
Yeah.
they say that can you pick up, say, the full stack, right? Can you be
Yes.
the one who
Yeah.
could talk to the customer? Can you do the one from understanding the customer, quickly draft the requirements, because what AI is taking away is the grunt part of the work, which anyways every time we humans didn't want to do. We didn't want to say,
Mm.
type down the technical design document or the functional design document. We didn't want to type down the use case. I mean, if I could just narrate to someone, and that's why we just thought that, okay, let me pass it down because it is a grunt work. Let me pass it down, and that the one with whom I'm passing it down, after some time, that person will pass it down to somebody else. So it's like everybody wanted to do always the creative part of the work which requires thinking, right? The work which requires negotiating, explaining, right? So the human skills started becoming more and more relevant, and I think AI really helped that. Instead of outsourcing your thinking
Mm.
to the AI, are you outsourcing the grunt work while
Yeah,
still
yeah,
remaining in control of the core problem statement and the outcome? Because the accountability still stays with the human. So if you are the one who
yeah,
is leading a project of this, leading a project, you are the one who is accountable for the outcomes, good or bad, right?
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
considering that okay, more and more is being expected from people, and at the same time we see that the learning landscape, the skilling landscape today
Mhm.
is still living a lot in the yesteryears, that okay, there's going to be a bunch of trainings I'd be doing for say a new joinee, or say somebody who is 3 years of experience in the industry and wants to
Mm.
reskill into this one. If you get a chance to build a team today, right, and you want to plan their skilling, how would you want that skilling to be done? What would be your expectations from a bunch of say freshers who are coming to work with you? How would you want them to be skilled so that they add value to your business?
So very interesting question, Amit, and I think you again are talking about building experience, right? Experience builds, I think, a little bit by discomfort and the exposure that you get to, right? If you're in a team which is you are part of a 7 member team who's maintaining dashboards for a particular client that have been built like 5 years back, and you're just doing enhancements, uh, the quality of exposure that you will not get you a very high experience, even if you spend a lot of time there, right?
Right.
Versus if you have been in a fast moving pace, and that's why maybe a little bit of digression, and that's why people are being tapped on to say that, hey, if you worked in a high stress or a high output startup, they understand that people by the possibility of being part of that ecosystem have been given a lot of agency and have been given a lot of experience, which is more critical than you've been in a structured space, right?
Yeah.
And that's what I wanted to tie it back to, that the way to understand or the way to learn is, if I have gathered 17 years of experience of whatever we are talking about now, now if I lived through in the Gen AI era, I think I would have been able to get that experience in 5 to 6 years, right? Because of the reason that the problems are getting solved sooner. There is lesser restriction in terms of for you to know and understand how things operate, right? The other part which I also understood a lot later was understanding like core basics, right? Because I'm from a non-comp science background, right? But I still understand now that, okay, uh, a container is a Linux box with whatever you need that needs to go in, right? It's an
Yeah.
input output device. You provide a library for how it reads input. You provide a library for how it reads output. If it just needs to run PySpark, you just need to put that piece. There is no OS, there is no noise outside in that piece, right? For people to understand that, I think becomes much more crucial so that they can understand that the Azure, the GCP, the AWS, these are all very similar synonyms for the different kind of services that they can provide. A SageMaker and a Vertex AI is almost a similar offering, but you need to understand differently of how an XGBoost runs, right?
Right.
But that's a different skill. But this tech skill that if you build well from deep understanding of what the system architecture or things are, then you can be very logical in breaking down how a particular input is going in and how a particular output is coming out. And those things cannot happen by reading.
Yeah.
Those happen only if you get exposed to, even in a smaller capacity, smaller data set, but you try to solve it by yourself.
Right.
right? And I think that is what is going to change. We need to evolve faster from being able to do I'm not a big proponent of certification, but what I understand is if you are given a toolbox and if you're a tinkerer and you can hit F1 and start reading not sequentially, but your problem statement that, okay, this is my error statement, this is how I need to go and start doing it. That was how people learned whatever Tableau, Power BI, and SAS and what we were
Yeah.
learning at that point of time, right? The bigger advantage is now you irrespective of whether that screen is a Snowflake, Databricks, SAS, SPSS, or whatever, the solution provider is the same Gen AI bot which is giving you that, right?
Right.
It's able to find through wherever it needs to find through and give you that solution. You just need to be sure that what you're reading through, you understand that and implement it in the right box. Or there are enough black boxes where you can mess up things and go wrong.
Right, right. And I think that's what it is coming up. The share of hard skills, I mean, which say, for example, coding, prompting, data modeling, data engineering, cloud engineering, right, predictive modeling, all those things have always been there. And I think people are still expected to know the tech part really,
Hmm.
really well. Because,
Hmm.
and when we say no, there is always a thing about that, okay, how much knowing is knowing, right? And when we say, when do I say that, okay, now I'm confident about this, and I can actually lose out a little bit to AI and say, okay, let me now hand it over to AI. And
Hmm.
so that, because your brain capacity is also limited, and
Yeah.
unless you offload few things, it's difficult to gain new things.
Yeah.
And something which people have always been claiming about that, okay, the project outcome wasn't good. We could have thought more a little bit. We could have explored more possibilities while doing EDA.
Hmm.
I have
Hmm.
personally found that EDA has become much faster for me because if I am still writing import pandas as PD and PD.read CSV, that really I have something which can type it out hundreds of times faster than me, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
build that. But if I can think more about, say, the features, I could talk
Hmm.
more to the business and get to understand the problem from more dimensional perspective, right?
Hmm.
That could be directly related to the outcomes which we are providing. We could
Hmm.
it's like doing more with less, right? This
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
with less people, there is less communication or translation error, right? What I wanted to get it delivered and what to say the middle guy understood and what the techie understood, and ultimately what I get was completely different. So the
Hmm.
communication layer kind of breaks down where you have
Yeah.
and you're talking to the person who's going to build it and deliver it. If
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
happens,
That's true.
why not? And whenever it comes to, say, documentation, summarization, presentation generation, unless being able to know the frameworks more, like, okay, this
Yeah.
is an established framework. Earlier I had to kind of think also and do also, build also, take care of aesthetics also. But now if I can direct that, okay, this is the framework, these are my findings, and you kind of
Yeah.
document and keep the context with AI can do that grunt work well.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I
Yeah. Yeah.
think
Absolutely.
that thinking is still something which it's extremely dangerous that you outsource your thinking. Otherwise, then it just become irrelevant and it shows up very, very
Yeah.
quickly to your outcomes, right?
Yeah. Yeah. A very interesting piece that you touched upon was, again, let me just take 2 minutes and just explain. One of the projects that you spoke about, which did not go very well, right? Very recent one, right? We were trying to build some really a risk propensity model. And we were working with some of really advanced data scientists and people, but sometimes what happens is that there is a difference in expectations of where you start versus where the clients expect to start, right? Clients' expectations were, hey, the moment we give you the data, run an XGBoost, run AutoML, show us what the output is, right? Um, and I'm telling the clients, guys, we can't do that because I don't know your data, right? So I need to
Mm.
take at least a few days to understand what is the distribution, which features are correlated, what is going to create what kind of impact in the final outcome. And sometimes you're also bulldozed upon, right? You're like, no, no,
Yeah,
we don't have that much time. Can you just give this quickly to us?
yeah,
And that's where you fail, because you as you rightly said, the building blocks or principles cannot be just removed and taken to the output at the first go, right? The It can go faster than how it was done before, But yeah, as you read, that didn't go well at all. And funnily, that's what happens, because when you see a young set of people understanding models for the first time, and then you throw a problem that, dude, this is a high imbalance. This is like one in a million. Data points are showing you the positive feature that you're building for. Everybody goes haywire. Where do we read this from? I think, boss.
Yeah, and I
So
believe
yeah,
more and more human skills are becoming important. How better you are able, because we know traditionally engineers and Indian engineers have not been very good at talking, speaking, explaining, expressing themselves. But I think those skills are becoming more and more expected from them. That first you have to be able to express what you have built. You have to be able to kind of
yeah,
sync it with what the business outcomes. You can't simply say that, okay, I'm the techie and I'm building it, but yeah, you take care of taking it to the customer. And that's where these skills are
yeah,
becoming more and more important, and that's where we see that an engineer who is good at tech is now starting to take care of more. I'm seeing more roles of sales engineers. I'm seeing more roles of these forward deployed engineers
yeah,
who are expected to do. And of course, that's yes, it is bringing that fear that, okay, what will happen to those people who are acting as middlemen, right? And I think it's
mhm,
better that
mhm,
instead you just being the person who is doing parsing the parcel, they're taking from here and passing on there, and then being the manager, right? That role is
yeah,
definitely shrinking. So either you as a manager skill up in tech, or you as a techie skill up in problem solving, right? And that's where the
yeah,
whole
yeah.
world is moving, and I think AI is making that possible, right? The grind work, the
True.
grunt work, which we always wanted to get rid of, I think it is still AI is just doing that. But if
Yeah,
as an individual, if we are outsourcing our thinking itself to AI, I think that sets a very, very dangerous precedent.
yeah, absolutely. It does. It does.
Awesome. So, Sanket, thanks a lot for joining in and
Sure, man.
sharing your thoughts in such a candid way, and talking about your journey. About you started off as an engineer, and then how did you get opportunities as a lead, and then finally somebody who has been leading companies and building teams. And I'm looking forward to a lot to learn from you about about your experiments with Gen AI. How would you do solutioning differently in the future? So I think there's a lot to learn from each other.
Absolutely, man, Amit. And thanks again for having me here. I know we've been bouncing off each other a couple of times every year. It's been a long journey getting to know you, I think, for the last 4 or 5 years or so. What you are building along with the others in your team is extremely interesting. And I think that has a lot of value. Organizations, but people need to think differently in terms of how they need to approach problem solving. You're providing the right platform, and all the best, and kudos to your team.
Thanks, Lord Sanket. Thanks for the encouragement, and looking forward to connect again and share more thoughts, go into more
Sure,
deep dives. Take care. Have a great day.
sure, sure.
Bye for now.
You too. Have a good one, man. Bye bye.
Bye. Bye.